My daughter-in-law changed the locks while I was at church. When I came home, my own key did not work. I stood on the porch holding a Bible in one hand and a casserole dish in the other, staring at a door I had walked through for 31 years. Through the glass, I could see her sitting on my couch, legs crossed, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. My son appeared behind her, and when our eyes met through the window, he looked away first. That told me everything. She did not do this alone. He had agreed to it, maybe even suggested it. I knocked, and she took her time. When she finally opened the door, she leaned against the frame and said, "We thought you would be gone longer." Not sorry, not surprised, just disappointed that I had come back too soon. I stepped inside and set the casserole on the counter. My hands were steady, but something inside me had already shifted, the way the ground shifts before anyone feels the earthquake. My son stood near the hallway with his arms folded. He would not look at me. I asked him calmly why the locks were changed. He cleared his throat and said, "Renee thinks it is best if we manage who comes and goes. For security. Security. In the house where I had raised him, where his father and I had carried him through chickenpox and thunderstorms and every nightmare in between." Renee smiled, the kind of smile that has teeth behind it, and said, "You will get a copy of the new key, eventually, when we figure out the arrangement." I asked what arrangement. She exchanged a glance with my son, the kind married couples share when they have rehearsed something. He finally spoke. "Mom, we need to talk about the house. Renee's student loans. All of it. We need $320,000, and we need you to either help or step aside so we can refinance." He said it like he was reading from a script. Renee had written the lines, and he was performing them. I looked at the new deadbolt, shiny and gold against the old wood, and I thought about how easy it is to replace a lock, but how impossible it is to replace trust once it has been broken. I did not always see my son this way. For most of his life, he was the kind of boy who made strangers smile. Marcus was gentle as a child, the sort who brought home stray cats and cried when leaves fell in autumn because he thought the trees were hurting. His father, my late husband James, used to say that Marcus had enough heart for 3 people but not always enough spine for one. I did not understand what he meant then. I do now. James was a quiet man who built things with his hands and planned for things with his mind. He worked for the city of Richmond, Virginia, for 27 years, came home every evening smelling like engine grease and honesty. He was not romantic in the way movies teach you to expect. He was romantic in the way that mattered. He paid the mortgage 3 years early. He set up accounts I did not know about until after he was gone. He once told me, sitting at this same kitchen table, "Lorraine, people do not show you who they are when things are easy. They show you when they want something you have." I laughed and told him he sounded like a detective in a movie. He did not laugh back. He just looked at me steadily and said, "Promise me you will remember that." I promised without understanding. I understand now. Marcus met Renee at a company retreat in Virginia Beach 6 years ago. She was younger, sharp-tongued, and beautiful in a way that made rooms rearrange themselves around her. She had opinions about everything, and apologies for nothing. I did not dislike her at first. I admired her confidence because I had spent most of my life being careful with mine. But confidence and entitlement look identical until you are on the wrong side of them. The first sign came early, before the wedding. Renee asked me what I planned to do with the house long-term. I thought it was small talk. I said I planned to live in it. She tilted her head and said, "Alone? In 4 bedrooms? That seems like a lot of space for one person." She smiled after she said it, like she was being practical rather than predatory. I let it go. I should not have. The wedding was beautiful and expensive. Marcus asked me to contribute, and I did, generously, because I wanted him happy. Renee's parents contributed nothing. I later learned they had cut her off years earlier over debts she had accumulated in graduate school. 3 degrees started and none finished, each one leaving behind a trail of borrowed money like breadcrumbs, leading nowhere. I found this out not from Marcus, who either did not know or did not care, but from Renee's own cousin, who pulled me aside at the reception and whispered, "Watch your pockets around that one." I smiled politely and tucked the warning away in the same drawer where I keep things I hope will never matter. After the wedding, Marcus asked if they could stay with me temporarily. "Just a few months," he said. "Just until they saved enough for a deposit." I agreed because saying no to your only child feels like closing a door on your own heart. That was 2.5 years ago. The few months became a year. The year became a habit. Renee settled into the house like water finding cracks in a foundation. She rearranged my kitchen. She replaced my curtains. She told me gently, with that careful voice she uses when she wants compliance, that my furniture was outdated and that she had ordered new pieces using a credit card I later discovered was linked to my son's name. I said nothing about the curtains. I said nothing about the furniture. I swallowed my discomfort the way I had been taught to, the way women of my generation were trained to, absorbing inconvenience so others could feel comfortable. But when she moved my husband's recliner to the garage without asking, I spoke up. That chair still smelled like him. The leather had molded to his shape over 20 years. I told Renee, politely, that the chair needed to stay. She rolled her eyes and said, "It is just a chair, Lorraine. You cannot live in the past forever." Marcus stood in the doorway. I waited for him to say something. He looked at the floor and mumbled, "She has a point, Mom. The room looks better now." That was the first time I felt something cold settle between us. Not anger, something worse, distance. The months that followed moved like weather you cannot predict. Some days were fine. Renee would cook dinner and laugh with me about a show we both watched. Marcus would fix something around the house, and for a moment, it almost felt like family again. But those days came less and less often, replaced by a tension that lived in the walls like mold. Renee began making comments about money constantly. Not mine specifically, just money in general, how hard things were, how unfair the economy was, how people who owned homes outright did not understand the pressure of debt. Each comment was aimed at me without naming me, the way someone throws a stone at a window without looking directly at it. Then she started talking about the house in terms of ours. "Not your house, Mom. Not even this house, but our house." The first time she said it, I corrected her gently. The second time, I let it go. The third time, Marcus backed her up. He said, "Mom, we all live here. It is all of ours in spirit." In spirit. As if spirit paid the property taxes. As if spirit held the deed. James would have caught that word and held it up to the light like a counterfeit bill. I just nodded and finished my coffee. The lock change was not the first act of aggression, but it was the first one I could not explain away. I had gone to church that Sunday morning the way I always did. Early service, same pew, same quiet drive home. Renee knew my schedule. She had timed it deliberately, the way a person times a theft around the owner's absence. When I confronted Marcus that evening, he sat at the kitchen table and rubbed his temples the way he does when he wants sympathy for being caught in the middle. He said, "Mom, Renee just wants to feel safe. She has anxiety." The old locks were flimsy. I asked him to look at me. He did, briefly. I asked if he truly believed this was about safety. He did not answer. Instead, he said, "Can we not make this a thing? I am tired. Tired." Everyone in this house was tired except the person doing all the enduring. Renee walked in then, holding a glass of wine like a scepter. She said, "Lorraine, we need to sit down and talk about the financial reality of this household. You live here rent-free. You contribute nothing to the mortgage because there is no mortgage. Meanwhile, I am drowning in $320,000 of student debt, and your son cannot build credit because we are stuck in a house that is not even in his name." She paused, letting each sentence land like a gavel. So, either you help us refinance and pay down the debt, or we need to discuss alternative living arrangements for you. Alternative living arrangements. She meant a nursing home. She meant anywhere that was not here. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the table. I said his name. He flinched, but did not look up. I said, "Is this what you want?" He whispered. "I just want peace, Mom. Peace." That word again, weaponized. Every time he chose peace, he chose her version of it. The version where I disappeared slowly and gratefully. That night, I lay in bed listening to them talk through the wall. Renee's voice was clear and strategic. She was listing next steps, timelines, phrases to use. I heard her say, "She will fold. She always does. Old women do not fight. They just cry and give in." My son said nothing. His silence was louder than her words. I pressed my hand against the wall, the same wall James had painted the year before he died, pale blue because he said it reminded him of morning, and I thought, this house remembers us even if our son has forgotten. I did not cry. I had cried enough in the months after James passed. What I felt now was different. It was clarity, cold and bright, like stepping outside on a January morning and suddenly seeing everything in sharp detail. I got up, opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one James had built himself, and pulled out a manila envelope sealed with tape that had yellowed over the years. He had given it to me 2 weeks before the stroke. He had not been dramatic about it. He had simply set it on the bed and said, "If things ever go sideways, and I am not here, open this. Do not open it before that. Do not let anyone else see it." I had nodded without asking questions, because James was not the kind of man who said things like that casually. For 5 years, that envelope had sat in the drawer undisturbed. I held it now and felt its weight, not heavy, but significant, the way a key feels in your hand when you know exactly which door it opens. The next 2 weeks were a performance. Not mine, theirs. Renee brought home brochures for assisted living facilities and left them on the kitchen counter where I would see them. She circled prices in red marker, writing helpful notes in the margins like affordable and close to bus route. Marcus avoided me entirely, leaving for work early, coming home late, eating dinner in his room. When we did cross paths, he spoke to me in that careful, clinical tone people use at hospitals, polite but detached, as if I were already someone he was visiting rather than someone he lived with. One morning, Renee sat across from me at breakfast and placed a document on the table. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of the house to Marcus. She had already filled in the details. All it needed was my signature. She pushed a pen toward me and said, "This is the simplest way to handle things. You sign, we refinance. We take care of the debt, and you can stay in the guest room for as long as you need." The guest room. I had a master bedroom, I had a house, and now I was being offered a guest room in my own home, like a consolation prize. I picked up the document and read it slowly. Renee watched with visible impatience. I asked where the rest of the paperwork was. She blinked. "What other paperwork?" I said, "The loan documents, the refinance terms, the repayment schedule. If you want me to make a financial decision, I need to see the full picture." Her smile tightened. Marcus appeared in the doorway, and she looked at him with that glance again, the signal that said, "Handle her." He sighed. "Mom, just sign it. We can go over the details later." I set the pen down and said, the word filled the room the way a bell fills a church. Renee's expression changed, not angry yet, but recalibrating, adjusting her approach. She said, coolly, "Think carefully, Lorraine. You are not in a position to say no forever." I stood up, pushed my chair in, and said, "I have thought carefully. That is exactly why the answer is no. I left the room feeling their eyes on my back. I did not look behind me. Looking behind you is how they know you are afraid. That Sunday, something happened that broke the last thread of pretense. I had not gone to church because I was feeling unwell. I was resting in my bedroom when I heard Renee's voice in the hallway, loud and careless, assuming I was asleep. She was on the phone, laughing. I caught fragments. She is literally rotting in there. I give it 2 more weeks before she signs. Marcus is useless, but at least he stays out of my way. Once we refinance, I will pay off the cards, and then we flip the house in a year. She will be in a facility by Christmas. Cards, not student loans. Credit cards. The $320,000 was not from graduate school. It was from spending, reckless and deliberate. The kind of debt you build when you believe someone else will eventually pay for it. Everything she had told us was a lie wrapped in a diploma she never earned. I lay perfectly still, breathing shallow, letting her words tattoo themselves into my memory. She laughed again, and I heard her say, "These old women are all the same. They would rather lose everything than make a scene." When she hung up, I waited until her footsteps faded down the stairs. Then I got up, opened the manila envelope, and read every page inside. James had prepared more thoroughly than I ever imagined. He had not just planned for this. He had predicted it. Inside the envelope were 3 documents. The first was a copy of a living trust, drafted and notarized 4 months before James died, transferring the house into the trust with me as sole beneficiary and trustee during my lifetime. The second was a letter from the attorney explaining the protection clause. If any party residing in the home attempted to coerce, threaten, or pressure me into transferring, refinancing, or surrendering the property, the trust would automatically redirect the asset to a designated nonprofit that served elderly women experiencing financial abuse. No hearing, no appeal, just a transfer triggered by documented evidence of coercion. The third document was a handwritten note from James. It said, "Lorraine, if you are reading this, I am sorry I was right. Do not argue with them. Do not warn them. Let them finish what they started, and the trust will finish the rest. I loved you first, last, and in between, James." I read that note 3 times. Then I folded it, pressed it to my chest, and breathed. I did not leave that night. I left Monday morning at 6, before either of them woke up. I packed 1 suitcase, the small blue one James had bought for our anniversary trip to Savannah. I took the envelope, my husband's reading glasses, and the Bible from my nightstand. I left my key on the kitchen table next to a note that said, "I have gone somewhere quiet. Do not look for me." I drove to a motel in Mechanicsville, 15 minutes away but a different world entirely. The room was small and clean and completely mine. No one rearranged the furniture. No one told me I was taking up too much space. I set James's glasses on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for grief to arrive. Instead, relief came. Enormous and unbearable, the kind that makes you realize how long you have been holding your breath. The lawyer's name was Harold Dunn, and he had known James for 20 years. When I walked into his office that Tuesday afternoon, carrying the envelope, he did not look surprised. He said, "James told me you would come eventually. I hoped you would not have to." I showed him everything. The text messages from Marcus pressuring me to sign, the photo I had taken of the quitclaim deed Renee had prepared, the voicemail my son had left 2 nights ago saying, "Mom, if you do not cooperate, we will petition the court for conservatorship. Renee knows a lawyer." Conservatorship. My own son was threatening to have me declared mentally unfit so his wife could take my house. Harold reviewed the messages, the documents, the voicemail. He nodded slowly, then looked at me over his glasses and said, "They have activated every clause James built into this trust. Every single one." He did not say it with satisfaction. He said it with the quiet heaviness of a man confirming a diagnosis no one wanted. The notices went out that afternoon, certified mail, to Marcus, to Renee, and to the county recorder's office. Marcus called me at 9 that evening. I let it ring 4 times before answering. His voice was shaking, pitched high the way it used to get when he was a boy caught in a lie. "Mom, we got a letter. From a law firm. They say the house is in a trust. They say we have no legal claim. Mom, this has to be wrong." I waited a moment before speaking, not to punish him, but to let the quiet do what it needed to do. "It is not wrong, Marcus," I said. "Your father set that trust up before he died. He wanted to make sure no one could take the house from me. Not even you." There was a long pause. I could hear Renee in the background, her voice sharp and frantic. "She is lying. She forged something. There is no way." Marcus came back on the line, his voice cracking. "Mom, please. We can fix this. Just come home and we will talk," I said. "You changed the locks on your mother's house while she was at church. You stood by while your wife handed me brochures for nursing homes. You threatened me with conservatorship. There is nothing left to fix, Marcus. You did not want a conversation. You wanted compliance. And when I would not comply, you tried to erase me." He started to cry. I had not heard him cry since he was 12, since the day his dog was hit by a car and he sat on the curb holding it in his lap, sobbing. That memory almost broke me. Almost. But then I heard Renee grab the phone. Her voice was ice. "You vindictive old woman. You planned this from the start. You set us up." I replied calmly, "No, Renee. I simply stopped pretending I did not see what you were doing. There is a difference." I hung up and turned off my phone. The motel room was quiet. Outside, a train passed somewhere in the distance, its horn low and fading. I held James's glasses in my hands and whispered, "You were right. You were always right." The weeks that followed were strangely painless, like the numbness after surgery, when you know the wound is there, but the body has decided to protect you from feeling it all at once. The trust transferred ownership to the nonprofit exactly as James had designed. Harold handled the paperwork. The foundation's representative, a calm woman named Sandra, visited the house and explained to Marcus and Renee that they had 60 days to vacate. Renee apparently screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Marcus packed his things in silence. He called me once more during that period. He did not yell. He just said, "I lost everything, Mom." I told him, "You lost it the day you chose her comfort over my dignity." He hung up without responding. I do not know where they went. Part of me hopes they landed somewhere soft enough to start over. The other part of me knows that people who build their lives on taking from others usually find new people to take from. That is not my burden anymore. I moved into a small apartment near Carytown with east-facing windows that let the light in early and gently. I placed James's glasses on the shelf above the desk. I set his note inside my Bible at Psalm 46. I bought a small plant and put it on the windowsill because living things deserve light. And so do I. I cook when I feel like it. I read for hours without anyone telling me I am wasting time. I go to church and come home to a door that opens with my key. Every single time. One morning, about 3 weeks after I settled in, I was sitting by the window drinking coffee when I noticed my breathing had changed. It was deep and slow, the kind of breathing you do when your body finally believes it is safe. I had not breathed that way in years. I did not realize how shallow my life had become until I stepped out of the room that was suffocating me. I am not telling this story for sympathy. I have enough of that already, stored up from years of swallowing it quietly. I am telling it because there are women right now, sitting in houses they paid for, enduring treatment they did not earn from children they gave everything to. And they believe that silence is love. It is not. Silence is what we were taught to offer when the people we raised decided we were inconvenient. Love does not change your locks. Love does not hand you brochures for places to disappear into. Love does not call your memories junk or your existence a burden. I am Lorraine, and I did not raise my voice. I did not seek revenge. I simply remembered what my husband told me, opened the envelope he left behind, and let the truth do what truth does when it is finally allowed to speak. If you are listening to this and you recognize something in my story, something familiar, something that makes your chest tight, then I need you to hear me clearly. You are not too old to protect yourself. You are not selfish for wanting to keep what is yours. And you do not owe anyone the house your life is built on just because they share your last name. Here on Spirit Tales, we give voice to women who were told to stay quiet, to endure, to fade away. We remember, we speak, and we show that wisdom does not expire with age. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please subscribe to Spirit Tales. Your support helps these voices travel farther than they ever could alone. And if you carry a story of your own, one you were told was too small or too late to matter, know this, it still matters. And when a grandmother speaks, the whole world listens.